Koikimo is an anime that consists of 12 24-minute episodes. It starts by following Ryo, a 27-year-old businessman who is a bit of a womanizer. As he walks through a busy train station, he trips at the top of a staircase, but before he can take a fall that could cause serious injury or even end his life, he is caught and saved by a 17-year-old schoolgirl named Ichika. And if that wasn't nice enough, after learning he hasn't eaten that morning, she gives him her lunch. Ryo is taken aback by these random acts of kindness and continues on his day. After he finishes work, he goes to the family home to have dinner with his little sister, Ryo, a 17-year-old schoolgirl. You can probably see where this is going. Ichika happens to be there that night, as she is Ryo's best friend, so Ichika and Ryo meet for the second time, which is a little weird. If Ichika and Ryo have been coming over for some time now, it is curious that this is their first time meeting in this house. But whatever. Upon seeing Ichika again, Ryo takes the opportunity to hit on her, going so far as to offer sex, maybe jokingly, but maybe not. Regardless, Ichika is immediately disgusted by his advances and essentially tells him to piss off. However, this only strengthens Ryo's resolve. He's never been turned down by a woman, and in this moment he takes her rejection as a sign of their one true love. What follows is a rom-com about a 27-year-old man chasing after a 17-year-old girl. Though I struggle to say that this show is romantic or comedic at all. I'm not going to try and sell you on the idea that this show is the epitome of evil, but I'm going to try and make it clear that it's definitely not fun to watch. I mean, we already have this pretty uncomfortable premise. I'm not going to say that all age gap love stories are bad by default, but they certainly have a lot of convincing to do. And well, for a large portion of the show, Ichika often and consistently states that she is grossed out by Ryo. But she's too nice to reject his many gifts, and when he calls every night, she picks up the phone. Eventually, Ichika does start to develop some feelings for Ryo. But to me, it was reminiscent of stories of real-life child predators, where the guy lavishes the girl with gifts and compliments, saying he loves her and she's beautiful until she falls for him. To be fair, Ryo does genuinely love Ichika and treats her well, but that doesn't mean I don't get a bad taste in my mouth. To many of the show's characters, the main justification for accepting the two's romance is that Ryo is a better person after falling in love with Ichika. But from a storytelling perspective, the show doesn't do a great job of portraying that. The main problem is we don't see much of how bad he was before meeting Ichika. We see a scene of him waking up from a one-night stand, we get a flashback of how bad he was as a kid, and we see a lot of Ryo's co-workers talk about how he's a nicer guy now, but it's just not that effective. Other than the one-night stand, the methods of explaining the type of person he was are expository. I think the show would have benefited a lot more from scenes of him being a bad guy before meeting Ichika, so we can see much clearer his improvement as a person after falling in love. Another thing they could have done is show his transition into being a better person instead of his change being instantaneous after falling for Ichika, because he essentially says, "Wow, I'm in love with this 17-year-old girl. Time to do a complete 180 with my personality." The problem is we have very little to compare his present self to. We have a glimpse of the supposed bad person he was, but we get a whole lot of him creeping on Ichika. It's just hard to imagine how who he was is worse than who he is now. And because the show fails to present this justification of their romance in a compelling way, all the characters that accept it come across as enablers. Each of the characters in the main duo has a best friend and a mother. Both of the best friends and both of the mothers support the relationship. I understand why Ryo's mom, his best friend, and his little sister Ryo, who is Ichika's best friend, could support the relationship because they see how Ryo has changed, but they never really make it clear why Ichika's mom is okay with it. At one point they talk about how Ichika's dad is 5 years older than her mom, but that doesn't automatically mean she'd be fine with a 27-year-old man creeping on her daughter who is in high school. The only person who is against it is Ryo's dad, who the show tries to portray as an antagonist, but because he's the only real pushback the relationship gets, he ended up seeming more like a voice of reason, and he does it just by acting the way you would expect him to act after learning what his son is doing. But then he meets Ichika for the first time, and all it takes for him to change his attitude towards the relationship is Ichika saying that she thinks Ryo is a good person. This causes the dad to accept the romance, albeit somewhat begrudgingly. I guess it's because it's the first time in a long time anyone has said anything nice about his son, It's a disappointing resolution to something that seems like it could have been a serious dilemma for our characters. I could go on. There's more things I want to say, but I think I've made my point. You know, it's just a story about a 27-year-old man chasing after a high schooler. And it's like, if that premise doesn't sound good to you, you're not going to get surprised by the stuff that happens in here. It's not like, oh, there's going to be some curveballs that they'll completely change your perspective on the premise of the show. No, the premise of the show is just what the show is. There's not like a twist or anything. That's about it. This show is on Crunchyroll. I recommend you not watch it. That's about it. I'll see you again next time.